princess was born to a king and queen. They were so happy they decided to hold a great banquet to celebrate the event. Invitations were prepared, and a special one with a big red ribbon tied in a bow was sent to the 7 fairies of the forest, for they were to be godmothers to the princess and bring her good luck. For days, the cooks and bakers worked like bees, making delicate roasts and fluffy pastries to please the dainty appetites of fairies. For the king and queen didn't want to offend the little people in the slightest. On the day of the great feast, the 7 fairies arrived, sailing through the air in a brilliant blue chariot drawn by 100 swallows. The fairies were delighted to be such honored guests. But then, at the height of the festivities, there was a great flapping of wings, a strange wild call, and through the banquet hall window flew an old gray gander, ridden by an old wrinkled fairy dressed all in black. The king and queen were alarmed. They suddenly realized that there was an 8th fairy, the fairy from across the mountains, whom they had not invited. And now she had come anyhow, without an invitation. The king and queen apologized and made her welcome. But the 8th fairy refused even to smile and stalked into a corner with a scowl fierce enough to make it thunder and rain. At last the time came for the fairies to give gifts to the little princess. The first fairy waved her wand and said, "She shall be good as gold." "She shall be the cleverest princess in the world," said the second. "And the most beautiful," said the third. "The happiest," said the fourth. "With the sweetest voice ever heard," said the fifth. "And everyone shall love her," said the sixth. Everyone waited for the 7th fairy to speak, but she had disappeared. At that moment, the 8th fairy stepped forward, waving her black wand, and said, "The princess shall stick her finger on the needle of a spinning wheel and die." Suddenly, out from behind a curtain stepped the 7th fairy. She had been hiding until she discovered what trouble the 8th fairy meant to bring. Now, she couldn't do away entirely with the 8th fairy's spell, but she could soften the blow. "The princess shall not die of the wound," cried the 7th fairy. "She shall only sleep for 100 years until a prince comes to awaken her with a kiss." Everyone was overjoyed that the wicked fairy's spell was partly broken. But they left the palace wondering if the little princess would prick her finger on a spinning wheel and become a real sleeping beauty. The king and queen decided to do everything in their power to protect their princess from the wicked fairy's charm. Soldiers were sent near and far to gather together every spinning wheel in their kingdom. They were burned or broken into little pieces, so that in all the land there was not a single spinning wheel left. The years went by, and as the 6 good fairies had prophesied, the princess grew up to be extremely beautiful, clever, with a nightingale's voice, and loved by all who knew her. One day, the young princess decided to explore the castle, which was very large and had rooms and hallways she had never seen. Soon she came to a winding staircase which led to an old tower. Up the stairs she went, opened a door, and stopped in amazement. There, in a little room in the tower, sat an old woman bent over a wheel, spinning. Now, the princess had never seen a spinning wheel, and she was entranced. The old woman beckoned to her. "Come, I'll teach you how to spin." As the princess touched the spinning wheel, she pricked her finger, and at that very instant fell to the floor into a deep sleep. old woman, who was the 8th fairy in disguise, laughed and disappeared. Immediately, everyone else in the kingdom fell asleep. The guards at their posts, the cook at his stove, the king and queen on their thrones. The castle grew silent, as if night had settled over it. Years passed, until at last, in the 100th year, a young prince from a neighboring kingdom, hunting in the forest, spied the towers of the forgotten castle. Curious, he rode forward. Inside the lost castle, the prince was surprised to find everyone asleep. At last he reached the little room in the tower, and there before the spinning wheel he found Sleeping Beauty. The prince was so overwhelmed by her beauty that he couldn't resist stooping to kiss her on the cheek. At that instant, Sleeping Beauty awoke, and so did the guards at their posts, the cook at his stove, the king and queen on their thrones. The castle was alive again. Not long after that, the prince married Sleeping Beauty, and everyone was invited. And of all the guests, the princess was most happy to see the one who had saved her life more than 100 years before, the 7th fairy.
A long time ago, in the middle of the forest, lived 2 children. The boy was named Hansel.
I'm Hansel.
And the girl was named Gretel.
I'm Gretel.
Their mother and father were very poor, but Hansel and Gretel were cheerful nonetheless. Sometimes Gretel would be so full of happiness that she'd want to dance with joy. Then she always said to her brother,
Hansel, come and dance with me.
Now Hansel was a little bashful, and he would usually say,
I'd love to dance, Gretel, but I don't know how. Oh, it's easy.
With your foot you tap, tap, tap. With your hand you clap, clap, clap. Right foot first, left foot third, round about and back again.
That dancing made me hungry, Gretel. When will Mother and Father come home with food?
Oh, not till late. But I know what. Let's pick strawberries in the forest.
What if we lose our way?
We can drop crumbs of bread as we walk. That'll leave a trail for us to follow back home.
A wonderful idea, Gretel. Let's go.
Off they went into the forest, dropping breadcrumbs as they ran. Each carried a little basket, and just as they stooped to gather strawberries, Hansel said,
Gretel, look. See that little man over there?
Why, his hair is gold and his cheeks are red. I wonder who is he? Now he's gone, Hansel.
Maybe we just imagined him, Gretel. Come, let's gather strawberries.
Soon, Hansel and Gretel filled their baskets. It was time to rush home, but when they looked for the trail of breadcrumbs...
Hansel, it's gone. That little bluebird up there, he's eaten all the breadcrumbs. We'll never find our way home now.
Oh, Gretel, what do we do?
Poor Hansel and Gretel. Night was coming to the forest. Suddenly, standing near them again, was a little man in velvet brown.
Who are you?
I'm your friend, the Sandman. It's time to go to sleep. First, I sprinkle you with sand. Then you sink down into the grass. And before you close your eyes, say your prayers so angels watch over you.
And at that moment, Hansel and Gretel fell fast asleep. But what a surprise awaited them when they awoke in the morning. Do you know the surprise? When Hansel and Gretel awakened the next morning, they leapt to their feet in amazement. For there, in the middle of the forest, stood the most unusual cottage they had ever seen.
Hansel, in my whole life, I've never seen a cottage like that one.
What is the roof made of? And the windows? And that hedge that runs around the cottage?
Good things to eat, or am I dreaming still?
Oh, Gretel, I'm so hungry. Let's nibble a bit of the cottage.
Let's start with the gingerbread, then we'll go to the chocolate cream.
Then hurry, sister, hurry.
But just as they took their first bite, a voice shouted,
Stop! Stop! How dare you eat my house?
It was the wicked witch, and this wonderful house was hers. Hansel and Gretel wanted to run away, but the witch stared at them and stared at them and shouted, Hocus pocus, bonus jocus, malus locus, hocus pocus. And neither Hansel nor Gretel could move from the spot.
You there, Hansel. I think I'll lock you in a cage and fatten you up. And when you're good and fat, you'll make a delicious pie.
Poor Hansel. Ever so often the witch said,
Hansel, stick your finger out so that I can tell how fat you're getting.
but the witch couldn't see very well. And Hansel stuck out a piece of wood instead.
Oh, you're still very bony. Later I'll feed you again.
When the witch was out of sight, Gretel said,
Hansel, I have a way to fool the witch. I'll tell her you're fat enough to be baked into a pie right now.
Gretel!
Trust me, Hansel. I'll save you.
When the witch came back, Gretel lit the oven and told the witch to take Hansel out of his cage.
You'll make a fine pie, Hansel.
Wait a minute.
What's the matter, Gretel?
Something's wrong with the oven. Will you take a look inside, please?
Very well.
The wicked witch looked into the oven and then,
Quick, Hansel, help me push her in.
with one push, the witch landed in the oven, went up in smoke, and disappeared forever. With that, the gingerbread head, and the roof of Turkish delight, and the windows made of sugar, all turned into little boys and girls, because that's what they'd been in the first place. Then the bluebird who had eaten the breadcrumbs appeared in the sky and led them all back to Hansel and Gretel's parents. Each child carried food and precious things from the witch's house, so the family was never poor again. And even today, you can see Gretel teaching Hansel her happy little dance. With your foot you tap, tap, tap. With your hand you clap, clap, clap. Right foot first, left foot then, round about and back again.
This is the story of the Red Shoes. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Karen who lived in a small village with her mother. They were so poor that Karen didn't even own a pair of shoes, and she had to go around barefoot until the village shoemaker made her a pair of sandals out of some leftover strips of red cloth. One day, Karen's mother became very ill and died, leaving her little daughter all alone in the world. But on a bright morning soon after that, one of the town's rich old ladies rode by Karen's house in her handsome carriage and saw the unhappy little girl sitting on the doorstep, crying bitterly. The old lady stopped and spoke to Karen, and when she heard what had happened to the poor child, she offered to look after her. So the kind old lady brought Karen to her home, dressed her in good clothes, and sent her to school. Of course, Karen was thankful for such good fortune, but one thing made her unhappy. The old lady didn't like red shoes. She had long since thrown away the red cloth sandals the village shoemaker had sewn. Some time later, the princess was taking a journey through the country. When she passed through the village where Karen lived, the people crowded around her. Karen especially noticed the red leather shoes the princess was wearing. These are just about the most beautiful red shoes I've ever seen, thought Karen. Oh, if only I could have such shoes to wear to church on Sunday. Now, Karen longed so much for red shoes that when the old lady, whose eyesight was very bad, took her to buy new shoes, Karen chose a shining pair of red ones very much like the princess's, and told the old lady they were black. Next Sunday in church, Karen thought of nothing but the lovely red shoes on her tiny feet. While everyone sang hymns, she seemed to see the dainty slippers floating before her eyes. One day, Karen was invited to a grand ball in the town. She knew very well it was unwise to go to the ball, since the old lady, who had been so kind, was very ill and needed the little girl to help nurse her back to health. But Karen couldn't resist the chance to wear her beautiful red shoes. So she went to the ball, and when she began to dance, everyone said, "What pretty dancing shoes!" Then a strange thing happened. Karen couldn't stop dancing. As if the shoes had suddenly taken on some magical power, they danced her down the stairs, through the streets, and out of the town gate. Away she danced, and away she had to dance, into the forest. Little Karen was terribly frightened and tried to throw off the red shoes, but they stuck fast to her feet. Over the fields and meadows, all through the night she danced, until she came into a churchyard. There stood an angel with long white robes. "You shall dance in your red shoes till you are pale and cold." But Karen couldn't stand still long enough to hear the rest of the angel's words, for away the poor little girl danced over the roadways, back into the woods. There she spied a small hut among the huge trees. Luckily, her magic red shoes danced her up to the door. She knocked on it. A tall, smiling woodsman opened it, and Karen, unable to move anymore, fell on the ground. The woodsman carried her inside and put her on a cot. Karen looked down at her feet, which had swelled to 5 times their size and seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. But as she told her sad story to the woodsman, the red shoes, which no longer fitted her, began to split, and pretty soon they fell right off. After Karen rested a while, the woodsman put her in his cart and took her back to the old lady's house. The old lady had completely recovered. Karen asked her forgiveness for telling an untruth and leaving her, all because of a pair of red shoes. The old lady forgave the little girl, and next Sunday they went to church together. And as Karen joyfully sang the hymns with the rest of the townspeople, she seemed to see the white-robed angel smiling at her, knowing Karen had learned that kindness and love are far more precious possessions than a pair of red shoes.
New Year's Day in Persia was the most celebrated day of the year. Wonderful shows were prepared to entertain the king and the prince. At the end of the program, a lone figure stood before the king with a beautiful horse. Your Majesty, I beg thee, look upon this wondrous animal. It is not real, but an ingenious machine that will carry me anywhere I wish, just by turning a peg.
Well, if true, it is indeed a wonderful animal. What is the price?
It is not for sale, sire, but I would exchange it for a portion of your kingdom.
Well, for such a trade, I must know more about this horse. My son, Prince Brahma, will test the animal for me.
The owner started to show the prince how to control the horse. But before he could tell him all, Prince Brahma turned the peg, and away he flew. He doesn't know how to bring it back.
It's a trick to kidnap the prince. Throw this man in jail until my son returns.
As the horse's owner was taken away, the king scanned the skies for the flying prince, but he was out of sight. High above the clouds flew the enchanted horse with the frightened prince. He traveled hundreds of miles, but he couldn't control the animal. He twisted the peg, but the horse continued to fly upward and onward. At last he found a small knob behind the animal's ear. He gave it a turn, and the enchanted horse started to descend. As he came closer to earth, the prince saw he was in a strange kingdom. I will be in danger if I am found, but I can't control the horse. The amazing animal carried Prince Brahma toward a palace courtyard. After I land, I'll turn the peg, and maybe it will fly away again, perhaps right back to my own country. So intent was the prince on the controls that he didn't watch the archway through which the horse flew. He was knocked off the horse into a courtyard. No one saw him, and while everyone crowded about the mysterious horse, Prince Brahma hid in a room. After studying the horse, the king gave out an order.
This is a most unusual animal. I shall give it as a gift to Princess Serena. Perhaps then she'll be my bride. Take the animal to the stable until I'm ready to give it to her.
Prince Brahma could hear the king's orders, and now he realized his chance of escaping was gone. Then he heard someone sobbing. He discovered that he was in the room of Princess Serena. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. She looked up and saw the prince staring at her.
Who are you?
I'm Prince Brahma. I come from far away. Don't let them know I'm here.
Oh, did my father send you to rescue me from King Agmir?
No, but perhaps I can help. Tell me how you came to this place. Princess Serena then told Prince Brahma the story of how she was captured by the powerful King Agmir. She must marry him or be put to death. I have an idea. If you pretend to be ill, the king will have to postpone any decision until you're well. I'll hide out in the city and return when the time is right. The princess agreed, and she acted as if she were in a trance. And soon the whole palace was alarmed. Word got to the king about her illness.
Send for the best doctors in the kingdom.
Each doctor who came tried to cure the young girl, and each failed. King Agmir sent out a call to physicians from other lands. One day, a strange doctor came to the palace.
I can cure the princess, but I must attend her alone.
When the doctor was alone in the sick girl's room, he spoke to her. Princess Serena, arise, for it is time for us to leave.
Prince Brahma, it is you?
Yes, Serena, but we must play the game for a while yet. Now we will see the king.
Sire, you see she is almost cured already.
Now, some special, unusual gift from you may complete the treatment.
How fortunate. I have been saving a most unique horse to give to the princess.
So the enchanted horse was brought to the palace.
It's beautiful. May I sit in the saddle?
Of course, my dear, it's yours.
Prince Brahma helped Princess Serena up on the horse. Then he turned to the king. You see, sire, she is cured. Now for my fee.
Of course, good doctor. What is your wish?
I wish the princess myself. He jumped behind Serena.
Never. She is mine. Guards, seize him.
But the guards gaped in wonder as the horse rose from the floor and soared away. Out over the fields and mountains, the prince and princess flew. After many hours, Prince Prama looked below and saw the palace of his father. The enchanted horse had brought them home. The king was delighted to see his lost son and welcomed the princess. Prince Prama told his father that Serena had consented to be his bride. The happy king released the owner of the horse and granted him a part of the kingdom in exchange for the animal. Later, when Prince Prama and Princess Serena were married, the king gave them the mechanical animal as a wedding gift. The young people rode away to have many more wonderful adventures with the enchanted horse.
Once far across the ocean in sunny Spain, there was a little baby bull named El Torito and 7 little Spanish boys who hoped someday to become famous bullfighters or toreadors, as they're called in Spain. Bullfighting is a very popular sport in Spain, just as baseball is in our country. And little Spanish boys dream about becoming famous toreadors. Toreadors are men who stand in the bull arena with sword and cape and use their skill to evade the horns of the angry bulls. To become good at anything, it takes a lot of practice. And in every city, town, and village in Spain, one can always see little boys practicing to become toreadors. In one little village, there lived the 7 little boys who were practicing bullfighting all of the time. They were Jose, Carlos, Juan, Esteban, Pancho, Manuel, and Pedro. They used sticks for swords, and they would wave potato sacks for capes. All day long, they would parade through the village, waving their sticks and swirling their capes in the manner of the real toreadors in the big city of Madrid. In their own mind, they were the greatest of toreadors in all Spain. Outside the village, fenced in a large field, there lived a little baby bull. His name was El Torito. El Torito was a very young bull, and he had no horns on his head, just little bumps where the horns would be someday later on. El Torito was a happy little fellow, as most animals are when unmolested, and he enjoyed prancing around and sometimes scratching his head on the bark of the cork trees that grew in his field. Sometimes, though, El Torito wished there was someone around to play with. It was a little lonesome being all by himself. Back in the village, the boys got tired of just playing at being toreadors. They decided that the time had come to be real toreadors and fight a real bull. Not a big bull, of course, just a little one without horns, one like El Torito. So they started up the road toward the field where El Torito was, waving their sticks and swirling their capes. 7 brave little toreadors. Jose, Carlos, Juan, Esteban, Pancho, Manuel, and Pedro. Standing in his field, El Torito saw the boys approaching, and little El Torito was happy. Here at last were some visitors, little boys who would talk to him and perhaps play with him. He watched them climb the fence into his field, and sure enough, the boys wanted to play. El Torito started to run, and the boys ran after him, shouting, waving their potato sacks, and swinging their sticks. El Torito enjoyed the fun, but suddenly, the sticks began to hit him, and with each hit, El Torito became a little more mad until he finally was very mad indeed, and nobody can get quite as mad as a mad little bull. El Torito was all through playing and charged at the boys, and the little Toreadors ran as fast as their little legs would carry them, but not as fast as El Torito, for he caught up with them and bumped each one of the 7 over the fence. Jose, Carlos, Juan, Esteban, Pancho, Manuel, and Pedro.